You can move with urgency. You can move swiftly. You don't have to drag your feet, but rushing into something just for the sake of, I need to get those things knocked out are probably not going to get you to the best long-term results.
Welcome once again to Relationships at Work, your leadership guide to building workplace connections and avoiding blind spots. I'm your host, Russel Lolacher, communications leadership expert, couple of decades of experience in both those areas. If you're a leader trying to understand and improve your impact on work culture and the employee experience, I think you found the right place. A Harvard Business Review survey found that 65% of first-time leaders feel uncertain or anxious about their new roles. 65%. That's a lot. And as listeners of the show, myself and my guests have repeatedly mentioned how unprepared new leaders are. And it's not their fault. It's a system that we need to improve. These are practices that we need to be better at implementing. Support, training, knowledge transfer, mentoring, those little chestnuts, those little things that I think new leaders really need to have. A bit of understanding as to what they're getting themselves into and have the tools and set them up for success. My guest today has some advice for new leaders, either those new to the roles themselves or new to the organizations, and some of the complexities in between all of that. Whether you're a new leader now, about to be, or responsible for those new leaders, this is a great episode for you. Hold on. And on the show today, we have Britt Hogue, and here is why she is awesome. She's the principal at the Collective Good LLC, which works to advance social justice and foster cross-sector collaboration. They partner with nonprofits, philanthropy, public-private sectors, all to uncover and maximize strengths. Britt brings over 20 years of experience with her, working across the social, public, and private sectors as a leader, advisor, and facilitator, including executing organizational transformations as a manager of global teams at Thomson Reuters, which is from her background, but not where we're spending our time past. We're spending our time right now. We're going to talk new leadership. Hello, Britt.
Hi, Russell. How are you?
I'm good. You can tell I'm caffeinated, but I'm great. Good morning to you. New leaders, such an interesting topic considering that we do a horrible job at providing new leaders with support, onboarding, training, so they feel really lost. Certainly from conversations I've had of what that first time feels, looks, strategy looks like. So I've got lots of questions, but I'm going to shut up because the question I want to start with is, what's your best or worst employee experience, Britt?
Yeah, I'm going to go into the past a little bit, actually, on this one and go back to my former life at Thomson Reuters. And I'm going to give the best experience because I want to stay positive kind of a space these days. So I'm looking for the positive moment. And this really was a positive one. And it was really important. I look back on it a lot when I think about my leadership style and a leadership style that I'm trying to emulate in some ways in the way that I show up with my team and with clients now. And this was with a manager that I worked for at a time in my career when I was moving kind of up the ladder. I was getting a lot of new responsibilities. I was a reasonably senior manager in my team, but I was pretty young. And so all the things you just mentioned, I really didn't have a lot of onboarding to that next role. I kept getting, just when I felt like I had my head above water, I would get some new responsibility. Some new people would join my team. They'd merge my team with another team and I'd be in charge of both of them. A new project would come in. And it was fantastic, but it was also really scary at the time because I never felt like I was ready. I felt like imposter syndrome constantly. What am I doing here? What in the world are they doing, putting me in charge of yet another thing? And this manager he just spent a lot of time with me and he didn't have a lot of time. So when I say a lot of time, he wasn't in my office every day. He wasn't taking me to lunch every day. It was probably 30 minutes a week, but it felt like a lot of time. And so there was something about what he was doing. So I often look back to that to try to figure out what was he doing that made me feel like I was getting so much of his time and attention when actually it was a pretty small snippet of time once a week. And What he did was it was always just an open one-on-one conversation. And he would always start the conversation with, "So tell me about something you have going on." It was always the same prompt, just a very easy, "Tell me about something you got going on." And what it allowed me to do was I could come in with a problem. I could come in with something I wanted to brag about that had gone really well that I wanted him to know about. I could come in with just some advice. Maybe I didn't have anything that I needed help with, but I just wanted to maybe run something by him. So the fact that he had such a loose structure to it and he let me kind of run the meeting was in some ways empowering. It allowed me to really kind of drive it and kind of take it in whatever direction I wanted. And then the other thing from that is that it was always the same. So I knew what I could expect from him. I never had to get anxious about this one-on-one meeting. Was he going to bring something up? Did something happen last week that maybe that hadn't gone so well that he wanted to talk about? Was he going to surprise me with something? It was always the exact same prompt from him. And as I look back, I think that consistency was really comforting to me, that I always knew what I could expect from him. And he didn't sort of throw any surprises my way in terms of that meeting in particular. And so I think that it was that experience with that manager that really gave me the confidence to keep pushing, even when I felt like I was often unprepared for the role that I was being asked to take on. I felt really supported. And I felt like I wasn't being kind of thrown out there on my own. Felt like I had someone who was in my corner the whole time.
I love that from a couple of different angles. I've used that technique myself in my own teams throughout my career as well. The consistency piece, what a lot of leaders don't realize is that's actually building trust. Because to your point, you know what to expect. There's no surprises. You can trust the experience you're having. And by extension, trust the leader that's providing that space. And it's not only time he's providing, it's providing that space because that's you that gets to drive it. And you're basically getting to demonstrate how you are as a leader for 30 minutes every week with them. I love.
Yeah, and try things. I know he's going to ask. Maybe I try something a little different this time and see how it goes. And maybe he kind of gives me a look like, I don't know what you're talking about. Or I would try to pitch him on something and he might just say, yeah, no, we're not going to do that. And that was fine too. But yeah, it gave me an opportunity to really craft, like, how did I want this meeting to go? And to your point about the trust, I mean, that's what relationships are all about, is trust. And so and consistency is such a big part of trust. If you know what you can expect from someone, then you can trust them.
And the other thing is, and I talk about this a bit on the show too, is there's the other side of trust too. Like, trust isn't necessarily a good thing. Like, we can trust leaders to be horrible. We can trust leaders to not have our backs. So as leaders, we really need to know what kind of trust we're perpetuating and fostering in those situations, because as a new leader, you're so vulnerable. You're so looking for any stability because your life is chaos. And if your boss can provide that foundation, even those 30 minutes a week, you're talking about it, I'm guessing, years and years later. And look at the impact it had on you.
Yeah. Yep. That's right. That's right. I think it's such an interesting point you make about trust, because sometimes we do have leaders who say, trust me when I say this, or they say, I'm going to do these things, especially like elected officials, or they're on the campaign trail. They're making a lot of promises about things that you may or may not want to have happen, but they're telling you, here's what I'm going to do. And I think can you trust them to do those things, whether they're things you want them, whether you want those things to happen or not. And if there's someone who always kind of follows through and does the things, then you can say, okay, I know exactly what I'm going to get.
What does trust look like, and what does it look like for me? It's such a personal thing, but it is like you said, and it's a huge DNA of this show. It's the cornerstone of relationships. It is trust. But what kind of trust and what kind of relationships are we talking about? Which leads me to my first question, because I am a big fan of definitions, Britt. We throw words around like crazy: diversity, innovation, but we put them on posters and we put them on websites and we never define them. So the teams are going, but what does that mean? What does that look like? What is your definition versus what my definition is? So to be clear, to provide a bit of clarity as we kick off our conversation on new leaders, how would you define what a new leader even is?
First, I love that you focus on definitions. We do a lot of work with organizations and we write glossaries because so many organizations throw around these different words and we don't know what they mean and we don't know what they mean for us, right? So equity can mean different things in different
Absolutely.
organizations. All of these things, all of those words. So I love that you focus on that. So new leader is important to break down because you could be a new leader, but not a leader for the first time, right? So you could be of someone who's led in another organization, but you're new to this organization. So there you're new leader. Or you could be someone who is in the organization and is stepping up into a new leadership role. So there you're a new leader, but you're not new to the people around you. And I think either way, you are someone who is taking on some sort of responsibility, right? You're either taking on some added responsibility from the role you had, or you're stepping into this organization and into this role, assuming this leadership responsibility. And I say responsibility because a big part of leadership is that you are supporting the team. Your job is to help make sure that this team, this organization has what it needs to succeed so that everyone can show up and do their best work so that we can achieve those results together. And so thank you for allowing me to take a minute to just kind of actually just even break those two things down, that we actually are talking about two different types and maybe there are other types of leaders.
And I like that you clarified that there's humans when we talk about leaders, because there's a lot of organizations that will call people senior leaders. And I'm like, no, those are managers. They manage resources, they manage time, but they don't have anything to do with people. It's about delivery. It's about the end justifies the means. And yet those organizations will still call them leaders, which those who are, to your definition, are looking about it. No, it's about my growth. It's about it's about you looking after me. It's about, and yet we seem to define them differently. So I'm thrilled that we are defining the same when it comes to leaders, because I think a lot of organizations really need to give their head a shake as to what a leader is and why are they perpetuating a definition that actually does not line up for a lot of people.
Yeah. And setting expectations for their leaders. A lot of organizations have a combination when they're thinking about, did you succeed this year? You're going into your review, you have your objectives and you have core competencies. And to your point, leaders do have objectives. They have to hit those sales results. They have to make sure that we've built so many things this quarter, we have to make sure that we're partnering effectively with these other organizations in the space. And so you may have all of those objectives, but then you have these competencies of leadership that you are responsible for. To say that you're a good leader, you can't just deliver on the management things, the things that you're responsible for managing. You also have to be hitting all of your marks in terms of, am I someone who is supporting the people around me? Am I somebody who is role modeling what leadership looks like? Because I want everyone to do these things. Am I collaborating? Am I doing all of those things? So I think it's so important that we're thinking about leadership as more than just the widgets, right? Or those aspects.
Delivery. Yeah, absolutely. So what do you feel are the biggest common roadblocks for new leaders when they get into these roles?
Yeah. So leaders do have a lot on their plates. You mentioned that before, right? They're spinning a lot of plates. They have a lot on each plate. And so I think one of the big roadblocks is trying to get organized around all of those things, and striking a balance is probably the challenge of new leadership. Is if you're coming into an organization and you're trying to get to know everybody, you're trying to get everyone to get to know you. You're also trying to set a vision for the organization, if you're at the helm of the organization, or for the team. So you're casting a vision. You're also learning about the organization. You're also just showing up as yourself and letting people get to know you. You're sort of showcasing your values and how you're going to show up. And so finding the balance between listening and learning and visioning, I think, is one of the big challenges. And sometimes leaders lean too hard on one thing or another. They spend too long in listening mode. And people start to say, what is this person about? I haven't heard them really say anything about what we're going to focus on for the next year. Or they come in and all they do is talk and they don't listen at all. Say, we're going to do this or we're going to do that. And everyone's, you just got here. Are you even going to give us an opportunity to lean into what's to come? And I think the same thing could be true for leaders who are stepping up into a new role is you have the benefit of people know you've been in the organization. So people know you. Hopefully they trust you. Hopefully they know what to expect from you. But you've also got to shift into this new responsibility. And so trying to kind of navigate through that space of, okay, I'm the same person, but I've got to do something a little different now. And I need folks to maybe see me a little differently now. I have to give you feedback and I didn't have to give you feedback before. And that's going to be tricky when we're friends. But, I think being able to kind of establish the way that you're going to do it and just have direct conversations with people to say, I'm still the same person. And let's figure out how we're going to do this going forward, right? I need you to give me feedback. I'm going to give you feedback. Have these different responsibilities, but let's figure out how we're going to maintain our relationship, the relationship that we have going forward.
Yeah, it's such a pros cons list when it comes to what kind of leader you're in the situation you are. For example, if you're from outside the organization, it's great because you're a blank slate. So you get to write your story as a leader. But then you've got an organization going, you don't know our work. You don't know what we do. You don't know how we do things. So there's that barrier. Or you've come from within the organization and people know you, but they also know you. So it's like, why are you a leader and why am I not a leader? Why did you get promoted and I didn't? I trained you 2 years ago and now you're my boss. Like that also comes with extra baggage that a new leader will have to navigate. It's almost better with an organization not to be leading the same team that you were promoted within, because it still has too much connective tissue. I think is almost too much of an uphill battle for a lot of leaders.
Yeah, I was in that exact situation where someone who trained me, who didn't want to be a leader, he said, I'm very happy just doing this job. I like the hours. I come in and I go. And I came in, I trained with him. We worked together for about 9 months. And then I was promoted to lead the team. And he just was like, you've sold out. And because we'd had conversations about, oh, they're doing that management thing again. Oh, they're just in meetings all day. And there you go. You're one of them now. And I just was like, no, I'm the same person. We've shared an office for 9 months. You know who I am. Yeah, I have different responsibilities, but I also know how we've talked about this. So those are the things that I'm going to try not to do. I'm not going to be those folks who come in and only talk to us when they've got some bad news to give us. I'm going to do it differently. So it is. I think there is that little challenge there. Now that you mention it, maybe I probably it would have been an easier time had they promoted me to run some other team where they can just come in without having to kind of debate with him about, now you're one of those managers, but it worked out in the end.
So as a new leader, this is even before day one. What kind of mindset should you be bringing into this position? Where should you be focusing on when it comes to how I'm going to approach this?
There are a couple of things that I always go back to, which is this self-reflection for everyone, for the leader, for the team, checking in with your own values to say, okay, I know who I am. I know how I want to show up. Irrespective of the job I've been given, I'm going to be me. And really making sure that even if you have to deliver a tough message, you're going to do it in your style. You're going to do it your way so that you are actually just still being you. So I think that's so important as one of those things in terms of the mindset that you bring as a new leader. I think just leaning into the realities of often new leaders are responsible for bringing about change. And so you know that you're going to be put into some tough situations, right? We have to cut costs, or we're going to cancel that project, or we're going to merge with another team, or there's something that you're going to have to manage this team through. And so just being prepared for that, I'm going to have to kind of stand up in difficult situations and I have to know how I'm going to navigate those. And so then you kind of go back to the first point. How can I be true to myself and authentic? And then I think the other thing, this may be less mindset and more of I hate to use the word tactic, but a way of going about it is to deepen those partnerships and those relationships. who are your partners in this? Who are the folks who you can really kind of bring closer to you in the moment and say, okay, and I'm talking a lot about change because I think that's often new leaders kind of come into a role and think, oh, I'm just going to kind of steady as it goes, kind of keep managing things. But then you realize, oh, wait, there are things changing all the time in organizations, and I have to be the one to steer them. I think having these true partners, people who understand the vision, who believe you, who trust you, who with whom you have a good relationship, who you can say, you're the folks who I want to help me do this. I don't have to go it alone. I want to have a group of people who can be my partners in this.
Hey, if you're enjoying the insights from our guests, you'll love our Raw Notes newsletter. It's packed with guest takeaways, the resources that inspire them, and my own tips on how we as leaders can be better humans for the humans that we're responsible for. Go to relationshipsatworkshow.com and subscribe now and help the workplace be more human.
I want to throw one other one because you kind of mentioned it earlier, which is curiosity. Because even when you come into a role that, again, like we were talking earlier, even if you were in that team before and now you're leading the team, you didn't have a leader's view of how people worked. You had a colleague or a camaraderie with those people. You didn't get to see how effective they might have really been or not in those. The only caveat I want to put on, and to your point, you were saying, don't listen for too long. From my experience, I did curiosity, but I communicated to the team that I was going to be curious for a period of time, i.e., I'm not going to say a word for the first month. I'm going to sit on every meeting. I'm going to listen. I might have a lot of questions. I'm not going to make any decrees for X weeks. So they knew at least what they could expect from me around, okay, he's going to start getting more involved in a week, but he really wants to learn our business first. It's that not giving them a timeline going, aren't they supposed to be leading at some point eventually and getting in here? Yeah. So it's that measured, I want to respect the team I'm joining, but you also have to understand I'm going to jump in here and I'm going to try to adjust as we go along. So I think curiosity but a measured curiosity would be really useful.
Yeah. And you're, I don't know, setting expectations, you're communicating about what people can expect from you. So I think that's the other really important piece of how you went about it was I'm giving you a time frame. I'm going to just listen. I worked with someone who came into an organization. She said, I'm just going to listen for 6 months. 6 months is a long time, but at least she said that. She said, listen, I've done this before. I've come into an organization and I didn't listen long enough. And I started putting changes in place and I hadn't seen enough cycles of the organization to do it effectively. So I want to do 6 months. Along the way, I hope to start to understand things enough so that I can be a part of the conversation and start to say, what about this? And have you tried that? But I'm really going to be in listen mode. You can expect no major changes in the first 6 months. And I think that gave folks a lot of comfort.
And I can see that working not at the team level, but I can see that working at an high executive level. Yeah. Because any changes will be have much more ripple effects at that level than it will be adjusting the team or making changes at that level. So I when you said 6 months, I'm like, you have to lead eventually, but I can totally understand it when it comes to the tectonic shifts that could happen at a larger level when you're just like, I'm just going to reorg this one person and then, the ripples down the hierarchy.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And she did. She actually did end up doing probably 2 or 3 org changes in that time. Yeah. But this person's going to go over here. But she didn't say, oh, we're actually going to stop doing this whole program and move that whole team over to this other. She waited for a while and she was the CEO of the organization. So I think you're right to be able to you have to calibrate this for what level in the organization you're operating.
I want to talk about change because you were bringing that up. The thing is, this is all about change. And it's, to your point, it either could be a leader coming in and having to exact some change, or them just existing is change because the team had a relationship with the previous boss, good or bad, and has expectations around this new leader. So I'm almost looking at it from a 30, 60, 90, because I think the first thing you need to do before change is build trust. Because if you're going to build change, who are you? What are you making this change for? Because we have to build trust with you first. What would you recommend a new leader to start down that path of that 30, 60, 90 of going, okay, I need to focus on relationships first.
Yeah. 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 And I think that's where just going back to the I'm going to listen for a while strategy really works, because you're not trying to change anything too soon. You're not asking anyone to trust you on anything. You're just part of the conversation. You're listening, and folks can start to get a feel. Okay, here she's in the meeting. She said she was only going to listen, and she did. She listened, she asked some questions, and she left. She didn't say, okay, now you guys should go and do this. She did what she said she was going to do, and she's been in listen mode consistently. So I think that just, we talked about it at the beginning, is like, so trust is so much about consistency and just doing what you say you're going to do. And I think in the beginning, in those first few weeks and months, if you just are showing up consistently, if you say, look, I'm going to make sure that I make my way around the organization and every team, or if you're at a team level, every person in this team, I'm going to get some one-on-one time with. Then just making sure that you do that. Like, actually make sure that you just meet with every person, even if it takes more than the month that you thought it would, just follow through on that. If you say, we're going to have a meeting every Monday morning where I'm going to just sort of share some kind of an outlook for the week, and it's going to be 20 minutes and no more. This may seem like a really small thing, but let's stick to the 20 minutes. Mm-hmm. Don't take a whole hour of their time and then sometimes take 15. And so just try to really just be mindful of even those small things. I think sometimes we overlook the really small things that people are paying attention to. All those small things add up, and people start to develop their own picture of you. And so you want all of those. You really, I think, have to be kind of watching yourself in those first few weeks and months as if you're the way that other people are watching you.
So far I'm hearing self-awareness is huge, mindset, situational awareness, building trust, understanding the organization, not only from a team level, but from a business organizational level. I don't care where you are in the organization. If you're a leader, you have to know how your work connects to the vision and mission of the organization. Probably some visioning. Maybe after that, what do you want because we mentioned that a leader needs to have some sort of vision. And I think there's a lot of value having it even with a frontline team, because they want to know their work connects to something.
Yeah.
What shouldn't we be concerned about in the first few months?
That's a good question. Right. So self-awareness, I think the curiosity point that you hit, so important. I don't know that I would be concerned with things like resistance in the first few months. I think sometimes as leaders, as anyone who's even run a project, you're prepared for, if I'm changing something, I'm probably going to be faced with some resistance. And so you start to kind of arm yourself for that, right? Go into this battle. I've got to convince them, and I've got to be ready. And actually resist, the same way we're saying what's under trust is, under relationships is trust, and under trust is consistency. What's under resistance is fear of loss. Mm-hmm. And so I think if you are a new leader and you come into the organization almost expecting the worst, you say, oh, everybody's going to be pushing back on me, and they're going to have all these questions, and they're going to think the worst of me, so I'm sort of preparing for the worst, then you're kind of just not allowing yourself to get off on the right foot. Just start on a more positive note and kind of assume the best. Just, I'm going to lean into what I hope will happen here. I'm going to focus on doing the things to build trust in the organization, to learn the organization. And I'm not going to worry too much about folks may resist or folks may push back. I think that would be one thing that I would suggest to new leaders.
I would say maybe also not having huge wins in the first 1, 2, 3 months. To your point earlier, and I love, because I also talk about it too, is it's small things. It is the small wins that will build the foundation of the bigger wins later. So don't think you're going to knock it out of the park right away, because they don't know you. They're not working and motivated and inspired by you. They're still starting out to build and test your boundaries yet. So I think any new leader shouldn't think they're going to be knocking them out of the park within the first little bit. And hopefully their executive isn't thinking the same either, or they're not leaders either.
Yeah, that's right. And actually, that you raised an interesting thing. As a leader, you usually have someone who you report to. Even if you're the
Mhm.
CEO, you report to the board or you have other stakeholders. And so being able to sort of manage up, manage over to them to say, I want to share with you how I'm coming into this role, into this
Mhm.
organization. Here's how I'm going to go through it. And I'm not going to try to hit a big home run in the first couple of months because I don't think that's the most important thing. I think it is really building these relationships, building a strong foundation so that when we have to do something hard, we can do it. When we have to run at that big win, we can do it together. And so I think giving yourself that, being able to say, I'm going to make sure that I manage expectations up so that I don't feel that pressure to have to do something. And then I kind of lose the faith of everyone that I'm really trying to make sure that I have these relationships with.
Now you're dancing into my favorite topic, which is communications, Britt. And I think
Right.
as a new leader, one of the most, so I've said this and I'll say it again, every job is a communication job. I don't care where you are in the organization, you have to know how to communicate. Sadly, that is not a skill set that a lot of people, leadership, like business schools don't teach leadership. They sure as hell do not teach communication. So as a new leader, communication is going to be a cornerstone of what you do. And as we just discussed, both up and down and sometimes sideways. What does that look like for a new leader when it comes to communication and the intent of that communication?
Yeah. And maybe if I may, I'll tell a little story about
Do.
how I got it wrong once, where I was in a role where I was kind of like where I had to have influencing skills. I didn't actually I wasn't in charge of anyone. I was in one of those kind of side individual contributor roles, but I was responsible for a body of work.
Mhm.
And it was my first time in a role like that, where I didn't actually group of people reporting to me and I had to figure out all this. And the mistake I made was and I didn't know how to navigate it. And I kept going to my manager, expecting them to kind of make it so for me. Tell those people to listen to me. Can you remind everybody of my role? Can you remind everyone of these things? And really what I should have done was really relied on my own relationships because I knew all these people. And I could have been more strategic in the way that I just went and sat down with them and said, I'd love to just share with you a little bit about this new role that I'm in and learn a little bit more about how this project it interacts with your project and your body of work. And like, how do you see this? And where does it fall in your list of priorities? How can we best work together? Should we have a weekly meeting? Could we have a monthly meeting? What do you need from me? Just really kind of investing that time up front to go around and share with folks what I had been asked to do and understand how it fit into their landscape and kind of make space for it in their priorities by almost like asking permission. How can we work together on this as opposed to trying to ask someone else to kind of force it in for me? It's kind of like why they're not listening to me because they don't have to. So they have to listen to you.
Mhm.
So you tell them to listen to me. And it just didn't work. It didn't. It was a huge fifth on my part, but it was a learning experience. And I really took away from that it's relationships. I could have done so much more to lean into those relationships with folk to kind of create my own success in that challenging situation.
I've found myself in those situations as well, where it's like, we're one team, but you don't report to me. So I have to go to your boss if I have any issues with you, but I don't know how they're going to communicate on my behalf. I don't know your relationship with your boss, but I know my relationship with you. So am I working with you or am I working with them to work with you to work?
Yes.
It's so hard.
It's hard to do that whole. And so if you can, avoid it and I think that when it comes to leaders stepping into any sort of situation that's similar to this, where the point I was making was like rely on your own relationships
Yeah.
and don't try to rely on something else as a point to kind of force people into listening to you or following you or whatever the things are. Really just focus on the relationships that you have with those people. And to the extent that you can, humanize it And you said we're all people, we're all humans, we're all trying to do the best we can. And we're all going to make mistakes. And so I think if you can really just kind of simplify it and get down to that very basic, I'm here trying to do the best job I can. And you're doing the best job you can. How do we both do that together so that we can both succeed?
So what I'm hearing is communication as a new leader is filled with vulnerability and compassion, and not only for yourself, but also just to sort of soft lead others or soft manage others as you're still building those relationships.
Yeah. Yeah. I like the compassion and the soft piece. I think there's so much about just empathy is a word that was thrown around a lot. And so to define it for me, empathy is just putting yourself in the other person's shoes. How often do we just stop if you're having a hard time with someone or you can feel sort of like the tension growing? How often do we stop and just say, what is that person going through? What are they reacting to? And just kind of put yourself in their shoes for a moment. Then you can kind of approach the situation a little bit differently, as opposed to staying on the offensive or the defensive. Just drop those things and just say, I'm going to come around to your side and try to understand what you're going through. So I think that, and with leadership, I think that shows up a lot as compassion, just
Or
understanding that
should
folks
anyway.
are trying to figure this out. Yeah.
So you've been a new leader. You've been a leader for that 30, 60, 96 month, whatever time frame we want to define a new leader as. How do you know it's going well? How do you know it's been successful?
I think you're checking in with folks, right? I think you're listening. One of the best things a leader can do is just stay in that, whether it's that formal, like listening zone that we talked about, of I'm not going to make any changes, I'm just going to listen and learn. I think that's the period where you truly are just in learning mode and you're just absorbing as much as you can. But you don't really ever leave the listening role behind, right? You're always listening and you're always checking in with folks. How are you feeling about things? Tell me how can I be helpful to you? So I think that just hearing how folks are responding to you will tell you a lot if you're paying attention. If you ask folks like, how's it going? And people are, yeah, it's great. And they want to get out of there, then read that situation. Don't just pay attention to the words, pay attention to their body language. Are folks not turning up to the meeting? Are everyone's cameras off? What's happening? Read the space, listen, pay attention, and then check in with folks. Again, do you have a group of people who you really trust, who you can kind of think of as sort of your partners here, where you can go to and say, hey, I'm curious. I've noticed a lot of people aren't showing up to that Monday huddle. I thought that would be a great time for folks to just hear from me what's going on, for me to maybe hear from other folks, and nobody's showing up. What's that about? Maybe check in with some folks and try to get the real scoop if things are not going the way you'd hoped.
And I was just thinking this, do you approach this differently as a new leader for virtual teams?
I think you do everything. You have to sort of turn up the dial for yourself on a virtual team. So everything that you would normally do to build trust and be compassionate and listen, you have to challenge yourself to do it times 10 in a virtual world, because you don't have the luxury of walking around and seeing folks, being able to say hi, folks get to know you. I mean, one of the things we've really lost, and folks who operate in a completely virtual world will probably get mad at me about this. And I think that you can manage it if you're intentional about it. But, one of the things you lose is kind of the things that happen between the meetings and after the meetings and walking to the parking lot or whatever. People have those sidebar conversations that are not scheduled and that are not part of a larger group conversation. And so you have to really find ways to build those things back, because it's in those conversations where you get to know each other. You notice that someone's walking out with their exercise bag and you say, oh, I'm trying to get back into the gym too, or when you have personal conversation with someone. Right. And so creating those spaces for that is a little bit harder in a virtual world, not impossible, but you have to just make sure that you create them. And I guess the same is true as if you're There certainly, I think we've all worked with managers who kind of come into the office and they go right to their office and close the door. And then they stay in there in their meeting, and then they come out and they zip to the parking lot. So but you certainly could miss those opportunities face to face. So I think whatever you're doing, if you're virtual, if you're in person, if you're in a hybrid situation, it's really being intentional about building those relationships, creating those opportunities for people to build relationships with each other on the team. And yeah, like I said, sometimes it's a little bit harder virtual. And so you just have to be a little more intentional.
I agree. And I'm glad you brought up the word intention. I think if anything, virtual challenges leaders to be actual leaders, because we love talking about adaptability, but then we change something like I can't do this. I'm like, Len, you're not a leader because you're using being in the office as a crutch for leadership. You just sit in your office all day. That's not leadership. But now they're virtual. Yeah, you have to do stuff now. So I think it's more, and it certainly showed up in COVID, of who the good leaders were and who the bad leaders were. And it's just a matter of new leaders of what kind of leader they want to be. And virtual geography shouldn't dictate whether they're going to be good or bad.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. Yeah.
Last question before as we get into the wrap-up phase here, Britt. And this is going to be an interesting one. What could organizations be doing to better support new leaders? Because I'm sorry, organizations, job descriptions aren't onboarding. That's to shatter your misconceptions of this. What could organizations be doing in those first weeks or months?
Yeah. I love that you said job descriptions are not onboarding. Job descriptions and people need to know what the job is, but we do a lot of, but what is your role actually? And let's all talk about our roles. You mentioned before the word system. Organizations are systems. And so when you're talking about folks understanding their roles, it's more than just the words on the paper. It's roles in relation to other people's roles. And so how do we work together is an important thing that's not on the job description. How does your team interact with that team? How do we make decisions together? How often do we need to share information so that everybody has what they need? How are we going to share information? All of those things. So I think one thing that organizations can do to support leaders is give space and time for that. Let's get clear about how this team works. Me as the new leader, I need to understand it, but maybe you guys have never actually talked about this way. So if we need to take some time to get into a room, a virtual room or a physical room, and just sort of talk about, okay, what is the constellation that is our team? How do we work together? How does your role support my role and vice versa? I think giving leaders time to really learn and understand the system that they are going to be operating in is something that we often don't give leaders a lot of time for. There you are, you're in the role, especially if you've been a leader before. You know how to do this, go. You haven't done it here. I need to learn this system. And then I think giving people time we talked about it before, small wins. Don't expect some big thing to change in the first 30 days. It's not going to go well. Give them some time. I was reading something the other day and it was listing off all these different idioms. Rome wasn't built in a day and all of those things, of all these different ways that we have said over the years that rushing things often does not get you to the best result. You can move with urgency. You can move swiftly. You don't have to drag your feet, but rushing into something just for the sake of, I need to get those things knocked out are probably not going to get you to the best long-term results.
No, and that's why I love the shift of, they say in the tech sector, which unfortunately most industries have adopted, which is move fast and break things. And I remember there being, I can't remember which TED Talk it was, but they shifted the narrative and said, no, you move fast and fix things. Yeah. And I think we're focusing too much on the managerial side of things. When we talk like that, leadership doesn't. Relationships aren't built quickly. Perceptions and expectations are, but those really meaty, trusted, to your point, your leader that you started out with, that gave you a sandbox, an established sandbox in which you did creativity and got to play and test boundaries. That is where this should be leading to, not this moving fast to get to that. That's, again, we're back to delivery. We're not into the humans.
That's right. Yeah. It's interesting. I struggled for a while with the fail fast thing. I do think, pay attention, learn the lesson, and move on if it's not working. But I prefer like course correct, learn and adapt as opposed to fail fast because you're leaving a mess behind. If you just fail, if you're okay with breaking things and moving on.
And we love a fancy, quick bumper sticker sort of decree when it's okay, but what kind of psychological safety do you need to be creating to be able to fail fast? There is an environment, an ecosystem that needs to be created that we don't talk about, which is the leadership piece.
That's right.
We're too busy trying to ends justify the means, which is management and not leadership, which I think there's too much of a disconnection.
Yeah, that's right. I think
I love this chat, Britt. I love this. You got me all fired up.
Yeah.
So let's put a wrap in this. The question I ask all of my guests to wrap this up, which is what's one simple action people can do right now to improve their relationships at work?
Well, we're talking before, and I said just the empathy piece, just getting into other people's sort of shoes, just taking a minute. And so maybe I want to simplify it even more because I think sometimes putting yourself into someone else's shoes can be hard if you aren't someone who kind of practices that on a regular basis. I think try. But I think that maybe the even simpler thing to do is just slow down a little, just to the point we were just about. Take a breath, maybe just take a breath and don't send that email right away after the thing happened. Just take a minute, take a beat, calm down a little. I think just things that can preserve relationships are just slow down, don't react so quickly. And so whatever you do in that pause, if it's just you take a breath or you kind of try to shift your perspective, try to understand maybe where they're coming from, but just give yourself a beat.
That is Britt Hogue. She's an advisor, facilitator, and the principal at the Collective Good LLC. Thank you so much for being here, Britt. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much. This was a lot of fun.
And once again, we come to a close of another episode of Relationships at Work, your leadership guide to building workplace connections and avoiding blind spots. I'm Russell. Thanks again for taking time out of your busy, busy day to expand your brain and get a little bit knowledgeable, as I think we all can be, definitely me included, about how we can improve leadership ecosystems and our roles within those ecosystems. If you find these episodes valuable, I ask that you just share with somebody you think will get some value out of these episodes, our experts or my own solo episodes. Pass it along. That's how we expand the community, isn't it? All right, I'll talk to you later and take care of yourself.